Rio is a bullied orphan who lives in the slums because his parents were mysteriously murdered. However, when a spirit goddess grants him magical abilities, he trains like Goku to become overpowered and destroys those who wronged him. It all starts when a guy named Haruto is heading to university on a bus, but Truck-kun says not today and sends him to meet God. Meanwhile, a fragile boy named Rio wakes up in the slums of another world, with Haruto's memories mysteriously transferred to his brain. Rio struggles to understand what's happening to him, especially when he gets memories of training in martial arts to become a Sigma Chad, only to get cucked when his childhood crush falls for another guy.
Women.
Rio starts to think the fever has made him Delulu, but just then, a bunch of thugs walk in and tell him to wash himself because he smells like Ronaldo's bum cheeks.
Brother,
Stepping outside, he starts eating berries to sate his hunger, while also adjusting himself to the buttload of memories. However, he tells himself that he is still Rio, an orphan surviving in the slums, who is on a mission to avenge his mother. Just then, he sees some girls in white robes, and one of them named Vanessa sternly asks if he has seen a girl with purple hair. Rio is hesitant to talk to them because they look like the wives of a Dubai sheikh. However, when one of them, named Celia, politely asks the same question, Rio says he hasn't seen her. He also tells Celia it's not safe here, because she stands out like a sore thumb in her fancy robe, so the girls decide to come back dressed as commoners. Before leaving, Celia uses a spell to detect any magical presence in the area, only to see that Rio's body is oozing with magical energy, which means he has the potential to become a mage. Afterward, Celia generously rewards Rio with a pouch full of coins as payment for his help, so Rio quickly hides the pouch in his chest and runs back home. As soon as he steps in, he gets stabbed in the heart by a masked man, but the coin pouch blocks the knife. He then looks around to see all the thugs dead, but as the masked man approaches him again, Rio backs into a wall. While he faces certain death, a magical spirit appears before him and promises to teach him how to use his magical powers. She then cups his face and tells him to remember this feeling, which makes his body glow, right before she kisses him and disappears. After that, Rio suddenly turns into Bruce Lee, using skills he learned from his memories to easily disarm the masked man and knock him out. He then sees something move in a bag and opens it to find a girl. After he removes the tape from her mouth, she begs him to take her to the castle, but when she sees the dead bodies lying in the room, she passes out. Realizing that she's the same girl Celia was looking for, he decides to carry her to the castle, but Vanessa and the others spot him outside. The younger one, named Christina, smacks him in the face and accuses him of diddling the princess. Rio grabs her hand and tries to explain himself, but Vanessa pulls her sword out and tells him to let go. She then orders him to accompany her to the castle and explain himself to the officials, and Rio has no choice but to abide. Soon after, guards from the royal palace surround his shed and restrain the kidnapper. Just then, a shady man named Reese pops a strange red pill, and the kidnapper mysteriously falls to his death. Meanwhile, Rio is taken to the torture chamber where he meets Charles, the vice captain of the royal guards. Charles demands to know why he kidnapped the princess, but when Rio denies it, Charles starts beating him like a piñata. Meanwhile, Princess Flora wakes up in her chambers and immediately asks about Rio. Vanessa tells her that Rio is being investigated because he's suspected of kidnapping her, so Flora explains that he actually saved her and wishes to see him. By then, Charles has turned Rio into a mashed potato, but Rio keeps denying any involvement in the kidnapping. Just then, Celia and Vanessa show up and are horrified to see Rio in this state. Charles is proud of what he's done, but when Vanessa tells him that Rio actually saved the princess,
it was at this moment he knew he f***ed up.
Charles starts sweating bullets and nervously leaves the room. Celia then uses a healing spell on Rio, and after some hours, he wakes up in a comfy bed with Celia by his side. When he realizes she saved his life, Rio thanks her for looking out for him, but Celia apologizes for what he's been put through. Rio then asks what will happen to him, and Celia reveals that he will get an audience with the king. Soon after, Rio is brought into the throne room, and the king enrolls him in the Royal Magic Academy to reward him for saving the princess. At the academy, Rio tells Celia that he doesn't know how to read and write, so she asks him to come to her office after class for tutoring. She then walks him to class, while also explaining that most students here are trust fund babies,
Here comes the money.
and they might not be very fond of him. After taking to class, she introduces him to the rest and asks them to be nice, but some students are already eyeing him like he's on the Epstein files. Once Rio greets everyone, a sussy boy named Alphonse mocks him for living in the slums, and everyone laughs at Rio. Ignoring this, Rio takes his seat, and Celia starts the lecture, writing math questions on the board for everyone to solve. She then asks Rio to take it easy since it's his first day, but the others start laughing at him again for being illiterate.
It's an evil world we live in.
After the class ends, Rio heads to Celia's office and knocks on the door. She quickly opens the door and sternly tells him to read the "Do Not Disturb" sign. But when she sees Rio, who has come for private tutoring, she smiles and invites her in. After he steps in, he sees several books scattered all over the room, which embarrasses her. She then skips over the books and makes room for him, but Rio is shocked that she reads so much despite looking so young. At this, she tells him she's the same age as him, but her brain runs on overdrive, so she skipped a lot of grades and became a professor. As they begin studying, Rio solves all the questions easily, which shocks Celia, but it comes easily to him because he has Haruka's memories, who was a brilliant university student in his life. When Celia asks how he knows maths, he says he learned it from his late mother, but talking about her makes him sad. To cheer him up, Celia makes him tea and then asks him how his day was. Despite the obvious red flags, Rio says everything is fine, then asks her to lend him some elementary books so he can learn his letters. Afterward, he joins the class for combat training, and when the professor notices that Rio has good form, he asks him to spar with him. As they face off, everyone stops to watch the duel. Rio takes the stance he learned from Haruto's memories and swings at the teacher. After some swings, he adapts quickly and manages to slip past the professor's defense, which shocks everyone. However, Alphonse calls it a fluke and convinces himself that Rio has terrible form. At the end of the duel, the professor praises Rio's skills and tells him that he has the capability of being a knight, but Rio politely says he has no interest. Later, Celia finds him studying in the library, and he says he wants to do well in the exams. Even when Celia says he doesn't need to take exams, Rio insists that he wants to do his best. Days later, after taking his exam, Rio heads out to see many students walking around, and this gives him a flashback of Haruto's memory. Just then, everyone starts gossiping about him, so he heads to the library to reflect on this memory. He recalls that Haruto had a crush on a girl named Mahiru, but when his parents divorced, Haruto left the city and was separated from her. Years later, he saw Mahiru at the university, but she disappeared after that and never returned to school. Presently, Rio is enraged as to why he has conflicting memories, and he convinces himself that he's Rio who has to avenge his mother. A few days later, the exam results come out, and everyone is shocked to see that Rio scored the highest alongside Princess Christina. Seeing this, Alphonse starts arguing with Rio, stating that a lowly commoner like him shouldn't breathe the same air as Christina, let alone score the same as her. He accuses Rio of cheating in the exams, but Christina herself tells the simp to back off because he has no evidence. After that, the commotion ends, but when Rio thanks Christina, she sternly says she didn't do it for his sake before walking away. Later, he heads to Celia's office, who is happy that he scored the highest, but she's also worried that others will bother him even more after this. He says he's used to it, but she says it shows poor character on the noble's part. Rio asks her if this happened to her too, and she admits others were jealous, but she simply ignored them because she had friends. At this, Rio says he'll be fine too because he also has a friend in Celia, which makes her blush. When she gets flustered, he asks if he should rather see her as a teacher, but Celia shyly says she's fine with being friends, even though she was hoping he'd flip her on the table and crack her. When Rio starts teasing her, she gets annoyed and calls him a sussy baka.
Sussy baka?
He then asks her if she'll help if he's ever in trouble, and she says she'll bury his face in her bosom to comfort him. However, Rio jokes that she's got a surfboard on her chest, and this makes her laugh. 5 years later, during combat training, the professor calls out Alphonse and his sidekick Stuart for an exhibition tournament. He also names Rio, but Alphonse isn't happy that a commoner should participate in a knightly tournament. Later, Celia wishes Rio the best and hopes that he gets scouted by the knights, but Rio says he isn't interested. She then notices that he's grown taller, but he jokes that she's still a shoddy, which frustrates her. When she asks what he'll do after graduation, Rio says he'll go on a journey because it's hard for him to work here. Not wanting him to leave, Celia offers him a job as his assistant because her office has been super tidy with him around. Rio gently refuses, reminding her that she will soon be married off to some noble, and having a commoner in her lab won't be good for her. When she says she has no intention of marrying, he responds that she can do whatever she wants, but she gets annoyed thinking he thinks she's too chopped to score. Rio quickly tells her that she's beautiful, and this makes her blush hard. She then asks where he will go, and he says he'll go to Yagumo, his parents' homeland. A few weeks later, the nightly tournament begins, and as Rio walks to his match, Alphonse tells him not to lose or he'll make him look bad too. Ignoring this, Rio steps into the arena and sees that his opponent is Charles, the same man who tortured him years ago. Since then, Charles has been demoted to an ordinary knight for what he did, so when he rushes Rio down to take revenge, Rio easily disarms him and wins the duel. That night, Charles gets drunk with Reese, who is revealed to be the ambassador of the proxy empire. When Charles tells him Rio is the same brat who is suspected of kidnapping the princess, Rice takes note of this. The next day, Celia waits for Rio so they can celebrate his win, but she follows him to the back of the school to see a girl hand him a love letter, which makes her feel jealous. That night, she returns to her office and reads everyone's postgraduate plans, but Rio is the only one whose paper is blank. However, she recalls when he told her he wanted to visit his parents' homeland, Yagumo. The next day in class, Celia announces that they'll be learning lightning magic to deepen their understanding of controlling magic. Wussy boy Alphonse in the back casually says that everyone can use lightning magic except for Rio, and Stuart adds that it isn't fair for everyone to learn something they already know because of one student. Hearing this, Celia asks both of them to show their lightning spells, and they produce a small orb of light. At this, Celia tells them they're filthy casuals and decides to show everyone the real deal. She starts by closing all the curtains and then producing several orbs of light all over the class, which explode and make it rain stars. While everyone watches in awe, Celia passes a smile at Rio, hinting that she's got his back. Rio admits that he cannot use magic, but what he can do is imitate the flow of magic, and this allows him to copy spells like Kakashi copied jutsus. After class, Stuart approaches Celia and tries to raise her up, but when Rio passes by him, he randomly accuses the poor boy of diddling female students. He even calls Rio's win in the tournament a fluke, but Rio is in no mood to argue with an idiot with a funny face, so he agrees to whatever Stuart says. At his, Celia tells him to act like a noble and stop throwing baseless accusations, so he agrees to back off, but not before telling Rio that he'll be watching him closely during practice. Flora has been watching all of this from the background, and she feels bad for Rio because he's being treated worse than an immigrant in America. Christina tells him that it's best not to get involved with Rio, but Flora still feels bad because she still hasn't thanked him for saving her life. Later, the students gather for the outdoor practicum, where they will be tested on how well they've learned military exercises. Just then, Alphonse announces that they will travel through the forest and reach the marked point, and even though they have till sunset, he wants to make it there by noon. Princess Roanna believes it might be impossible because the forest is crowded, but Stuart reveals that he used his military connections to have them mark the easiest route. Roanna says it feels like cheating, but Alphonse says information is key during wars, and they're just using the tool at hand. He even tries to get Christina on board, but she tells him to do whatever he wants. When they are about to leave, Stuart tells Rio to carry their bags since he's useless anyway, and Rio calmly agrees. Seeing this, Flora asks if he needs some help, but Rio kindly tells her not to worry about it. Despite this, Flora tells Christina that she can't let others treat Rio this way. But a squad of goblins suddenly shows up. Alphonse tells his boys to stay calm and use enhancement magic, after which, the boys take all of the goblins out by themselves. As Alphonse praises his boys, he notices that Rio is looking in the opposite direction, and tells him to focus. Unbeknownst to him, Rio spotted Reese's presence in the forest, and because of this, Reese decides to test his abilities. As the squad continues its journey, it arrives at the end of the cliff, which leaves Alphonse confused. Before he can figure out what to do, they are ambushed by a bunch of orcs who hurl spears in their direction. Stuart is scraped by one of the spears and bumps into Flora, causing her to slip off the edge. Rio notices this and immediately jumps after her, using magic to propel her back to the cliff while he falls into the forest below. As the orcs continue attacking, Alphonse guides the vanguard and the mages into a formation, allowing them to defeat the orcs while Christina heals the wounded. Meanwhile, Rio uses wind magic to land safely, and while he's wondering how he acquired this magic, he hears the students arguing above. Apparently, a girl saw Stuart bump into Flora, but Stuart blames Rio for pushing him into Flora. Alphonse backs him up, stating that Rio must have offed himself because he couldn't live with the guilt of pushing Flora. Even when Flora denies this, they decide to continue with their mission before more monsters show up. However, Flora refuses to leave Rio behind, as he saved her life again. But just then, a Minotaur shows up, and Christina hits it with a thunderbolt. When it does no damage, Alphonse suggests using Ice Lance, but even that fails, and the Minotaur knocks out the vanguard. As everyone runs for their lives, Flora goes after the wounded to heal them, but the Minotaur follows her into the woods and is about to eat her. Luckily, Rio arrives at the last second and slices its arm, telling Flora to take the wounded guy and make a run for it. Rio then fights the Minotaur head-on, and after parrying its strikes like he's mastered Sekiro, Rio dashes into the air and swings his sword, defeating it in a single blow. He then sees Christina and Roanna show up in the forest, so he quietly leaves before anyone sees him. All this time, Reese has been watching closely and is impressed by Rio's powers. He also notices Rio's black hair and wonders if his parents came here from the Yagumo region, which will enable him to use spirit arts. Later at the academy, Celia is heading to Principal Gracia's office to hand in a report, but she hears Duke Huguenot talking about Rio. Gracia says Rio has gone missing, and Flora has told her the whole story, but Huguenot doesn't want his family name tainted and wants to blame Rio for the incident. Hearing this, Celia is shocked and wonders what happened to Rio. Later, while she's in her office, Rio suddenly shows up, and she runs into his arms. After she makes sure he's okay, Rio tells her everything that went down, and she's frustrated that he's been falsely accused, even when he did nothing wrong. Rio says that people with power decide what's right or wrong, and even if he were to fight this in court, no one will listen, as he's just a commoner. Celia feels disappointed in herself for being unable to help him, but he gently thanks her, saying he owes his life to her. He adds that he wanted to see her before he left, and she immediately realizes that he's going to Yagumo. Celia is sad that she won't get to see him graduate, but he promises to write him letters using his alias, Haruto. After that, they say their goodbyes, and Rio says she will see him again before leaving, which makes Celia cry. 3 days later, Rio reaches the neighboring kingdom of Gaylord, and is relieved to learn that he's not a wanted criminal in this kingdom. Heading to the busy town of Amande, Rio looks around the market but suddenly senses someone following him. He tells himself that it's nothing, but someone's really following him. As he continues, he sees a shopkeeper selling pasta, and this catches his attention because pasta is a dish he knows only from Haruto's memories. The shopkeeper tells him their Governor Lisalot invented it, and when he takes a bite, it takes him back to Haruto's memories, making him wonder if Lisalot came from the same world as Haruto. However, he brushes it off again, as he wants to see the place his parents came from. He then asks the shopkeeper where he can get noodles, so the man guides him to the Rika Merchant Guild. Once there, he sees another shopkeeper selling meat buns, which makes him feel nostalgic. As he enters the guild, he is shocked by the modern architecture, but one of the servers asks him to remove his weapon and hood. After he cooperates, she introduces herself as Lotta, and takes him around the guild. Afterward, as Rio is in the waiting room, Lotte brings in all the items they bought for his journey and asks if he needs a carriage, but Rio says he'll carry it since he's a Sigma boy. She then notes that he is already accustomed to black tea, and Rio says it's because he used to have it with a friend. Lotte then asks if he recognizes those leaves, and Rio guesses that they were imported from Liss, which makes her excited. Later, as the girls pack his stuff, he writes a letter to Celia to tell her everything is fine, and it'll be a while before he sends any more letters. After that, Rio leaves the guild, not knowing that her personal attendant was Governor Lisalot herself in disguise. As he continues, he finds a girl passed out in the forest and stops to check up on her. However, it turns out to be a trap as the girl fires a dart towards him before attacking him. Rio manages to create distance, but he starts to feel dizzy and realizes the dart was coated with poison. He also notices that the ambusher is a beast girl, who declares that she will take his life. As Rio uses a healing spell to cure the poison, she is surprised and rushes him down with a knife. However, Rio expertly dodges her and even manages to snatch her knife, causing her to climb a tree quickly. She then uses enhancement magic to increase her speed, and when Rio charges her, she leaps back and throws more knives at him. Seeing him deflect all of them, the girl is shocked and wonders how a human can be this fast before leaping at him again. After exchanging some blows, Rio notices that she is too focused on her knife, so he lures her in for an attack and grabs her arm before smashing her into the ground. After that, he quickly disarms her and pins her down, and the girl suddenly starts crying, thinking he's about to swipe her V-card. At this, Rio uses a spell to put her to sleep, allowing him to remove all her weapons and tie her up. He also notices a collar of submission around her neck, so he recalls a spell that he once read about that nullifies the collar's effect. When he uses that spell on her, the collar suddenly comes off, and the girl is suddenly hit with a wave of memories. Turns out, there was a little girl named Suzune, who was on the same bus as Haruto, whose memories were transferred to the beast girl Latifah after the crash. Additionally, Latifah was a slave gifted to Stuart, and he'd treat her harshly and even torture her with a collar. Recalling all this, Latifah wakes up and tries to free herself, but when Rio tells her to stop resisting, she obeys him, thinking he will torture her too. Rio then shows her that he's removed the collar around her neck, and no one will hurt her anymore. Finally free, Latifah bawls her eyes out, but Rio tells her to save the whining for later and answer her questions. He asks her if she knows the person who gave her the order to hunt him, but she says she doesn't. However, when she mentions Stuart's name, Rio immediately puts 2 and 2 together, realizing that Duke Huguenot must have sent Latifah after him to cover all tracks. He then asks Latifah if she still wants to end him even though her collar is gone, and she immediately says she has no such intentions. Hearing this, Rio lets her go and tells her to head to the east, where other demi-humans live, before continuing his journey. However, she keeps following him, saying that she has nothing to do and doesn't want to be alone. When Rio says she should avoid humans because they all saved her, Latifah says she knows he's different. However, Rio gives her a cold look, which sends shivers down her spine. Rio then says he is not angry with her as she was merely following orders, but there's no guarantee that she won't attack him again. At this, Latifah asks him to put the same collar around her neck, begging him to take her with him as she doesn't want to be alone. Finally, Rio folds and allows her to walk with him, and she happily follows him through the forest. After a bit, they stop to grab lunch, and Rio makes her a sandwich, which she gobbles while crying because she hasn't had good food in years. After traveling for some days, they reach the wilderness, but when Rio notices that Latifah is extremely tired, he decides to call it a day. That night, Celia receives a letter from Rio, and after reading through it, she hopes that he's safe and sound. Meanwhile, as Rio cooks spaghetti, Latifah recognizes the dish, which shocks Rio because he doesn't know that she also has memories of a different person like him. However, as she gobbles it up, he starts to suspect that they might be the same. Later, while sleeping, Rio sees that Latifah is having a nightmare, so he cuddles her up, and she says that she wants to go to Japan, which shocks him even more. The following day, Latifah wakes up and is embarrassed to find Rio sleeping next to her. Seeing his black hair, she notes that Rio looks a lot like Haruto. Just then, Rio wakes up and she recoils, hitting her head on the rod. She then asks Rio if she can call him Oni-chan, and Rio says he doesn't mind. He also feels bad for her because she was separated from her family and ended up as a slave here, so he's glad to give her comfort. After that, they continue their journey through the lands until Rio spots a giant tree in the forest. However, Latifah is unable to see it for some reason, and Rio concludes that it's being blocked from vision through magic. Curious, he decides to check it out and steps into the forest, but when Latifah smells something she doesn't recognize, he decides to set camp there. That night, he sees that Latifah is having another nightmare, so he uses a spell to ease her mind. Just then, the campfire goes out, so when Rio steps outside to check, he sees a large wolf that flows so bright that it blinds him. Now blinded, Rio gets surrounded by some shady-looking beast girls who start attacking him. When he uses magic to defend himself, the beast girls back off, and when he notices that they're demi-humans, he says he just wants to talk. Despite being suspicious, the girls decide to listen to what he has to say, and their leader, Sarah, sends Orphea and Alma to investigate the area. She then asks Uzuma to stand guard before approaching Rio and telling him that he shouldn't address them as demi-humans, as it's a derogatory term. Hearing this, Rio apologizes because he didn't know, but just then, Orphea and Alma find Latifah in the tent with a sleep spell on her. Immediately, Uzuma lunges with her lance, and when Sarah asks why she attacked, Uzuma says it's because Rio has kidnapped one of their kind. Now hurt, Rio uses a spell to heal himself, but Uzuma keeps attacking him, which confuses Rio. When they accuse him of kidnapping, Rio says it's a misunderstanding as he brought her here so the beast people can take her. However, Uzuma refuses to listen and continues to attack him. As he steps back, Alma uses a spell to lock his feet, and Uzuma blasts him with magic, which knocks him out. Uzuma then finds himself floating in water, and a spirit appears before him. She addresses him by the name Haruto, and when he asks why she's here, she says she's connected to him. Cupping his face in her hands, she says that she belongs to him, but their time is up, so he must wake up. After she disappears, Rio sees the face of Haruto's crush, and as he reaches out his hand for her, he wakes up and finds himself surrounded by Orphea and Alma. Immediately, Latifah runs into the room to hug him and starts crying as she thought he was dead. She then notices that Rio is changed to the bed, and when Sarah and Uzuma arrive, she gives them a death stare for hurting her Oni-chan. Just then, the village elder, Ursula, shows up and apologizes to Rio for the warm welcome he received. After that, Uzuma gets on her knees to apologize for attacking him, followed by the other girls. Rio says it's fine because it was just a misunderstanding, but Ursula promises to make them take responsibility later. She then asks Orphea to unchain him, and as Orphea does, Ursula reveals that Rio will meet the elders tomorrow. For the night, Rio is their guest, so she asks him to make himself comfortable. After resting for the night, Rio accompanies Ursula to the council room, and on the way, she introduces him to the world tree that hosts the spirit of their goddess Dryas. Rio says he saw this tree from the outside too, which impresses Ursula since there's a high-level illusion barrier that hides it, and only those who know special spirit arts can see it. She asks Rio who he learned magic from, and Bro says he's self-taught. After this, she takes him to the council room, where he meets the village chief, Sildora, and the blacksmith Dominic. When Rio thanks them for inviting him here, Sildora formally apologizes for the troubles he faced and thanks him for freeing Latifah. They also say that they want to do more, but they are not familiar with what a human might like. Rio says he only wants them to take Latifah into their care, and they happily agree to it since she's one of theirs. However, Latifah is a bit attached to Rio, so Ursula asks him to stay in the village for a bit so she can become familiar with the place, while the others offer him anything he needs. Dominic goes a step further by offering some demi-human coochie, but Ursula tells the old fart to stop being an idiot. Rio then asks if they can teach him more about spirit arts, and the elders agree to assign him a teacher. Just then, a spirit emerges in the room next to Rio, and the village elders immediately stand in respect, addressing her as their spirit goddess Dryas. She then leans into Rio and says she notices a faint spirit inside of him, and when she asks him if he formed a covenant with any spirit, Rio says he has no idea what she's saying. She then says that forming a covenant with spirits will hinder his ability to use magic, and Rio finally realizes why he hasn't been able to cast spells like everyone else. Curious, Dryas asks if she can peek into his soul, and when he says yes, she cups his face and brings her face closer, which makes him feel funny in his third leg. After checking him out, Dryas reveals that there is a person-shaped spirit inside of him, which shocks the elders. When Dryas realizes that Rio is uneducated on this topic, she reveals that person-shaped spirits are of the highest class and rare. She further says that all 6 of the great spirits went missing during the Divine Demon War, and the spirit inside Rio might be one of those great spirits. Rio asks her if he's in trouble, but Dryas tells him that it's the opposite because the beast folk will treat him like their god. Right on cue, the elders discuss making Rio a village saint, and he humbly accepts it. Later, Orphea takes him to his new home, where Latifah greets him with a smile. She then takes him on a tour of the place, and while they're having food, he learns that beast folk buy a special grain that only grows in the Yagumo region. Afterward, Sarah reveals they'll be staying in this house with him, but before he can say anything, Ursula arrives and asks for his permission. He worries that it'll be weird for them to live with a human, but Ursula believes that living together will actually be better for them, so Latifah becomes familiar with the others. At this, Rio agrees to let them stay and asks them to stop calling her Sir, so instead, they decide to call him Master. Later, Orphea teaches him how to use spirit arts to fly, and over the next few weeks, he becomes quite familiar with everyone. Then at the start of spring, the village holds the Grand Spirit Festival, and everyone prays to the gods to bless their harvest. Meanwhile, Rhys arrives in the wilderness with his underling, and they step into a cave to retrieve a wyvern's egg. When his underling asks what it's for, he says it's to augment their military strength. After that, Rhys makes him wrap the egg around his waist, and they fly off on their griffin. Just then, Rhys sees a horde of wyverns following them and smirks, as it's part of his plan. Later, the beast folks celebrate the first anniversary of Rio and Latifah coming to their village, and Sildora reveals that they will be getting a kiss of blessing from Lady Dryas. Both of them walk up the stairs where Dryas is waiting, and she blesses them both with a kiss on the forehead. After that, they all celebrate with a feast, during which Rio finds himself squished between Sarah, Orphea, and Latifah. Orphea asks him if he's having fun, and he says he is. However, because he still calls her Miss Orphea, she gets sad, even though it's been a year since they've known each other. At this, Sarah wraps her arms around him, and while Rio tries his best not to bust in his pants, Latifah gets jealous and holds him so hard that he starts to choke. When Alma joins them, she scolds the girls for making Rio uncomfortable, but they argue that they're just trying to deepen their friendship. Rio thought they were already good friends, but the girls say that they want him to go deeper, and Rio agrees to be more friendly with them. At this, the girls cheer up, and Sarah leaves to chug another jug of rum. The others decide to leave too, and just then, Ursula joins Rio, and they both talk about how Latifah has been super happy with her new family. Rio then says it's finally time that he leaves the village, but he knows that Latifah won't take it well. Meanwhile, Rhys is in a nearby forest, and he tells his underling that they'll camp for the night and leave for the Straw region tomorrow. He also tells the underling that he has to survey the area, so he gives him a red pill to swallow, saying it'll help him track his location. After telling the boy to take care of the egg, Rhys flies up and smirks as he sees a swarm of wyverns coming to get their egg back. In the meantime, Rio takes Latifah on a walk and asks if she likes living here. Latifah excitedly says that she loves her life and everyone around her, so he finally tells her that he will leave the village after some time. Immediately, her mood shifts, and she says she will go with him, but he says he can't take her there because he can't guarantee her safety. Hearing this makes Latifah upset, so she runs off into the woods while crying. Meanwhile, Sarah is called to the council room, where Sildora tells him that they've noticed some reaction inside the barrier. As Sarah rushes to scout, Rhys arrives at the Cave of Wyverns, which is filled with eggs and is unprotected, as all the wyverns are after the first egg. While he uses magic to steal all the eggs, Sarah and the others spot Rhys's underling and the griffin inside the forest. When they approach him, they notice him carrying the egg, but the guy quickly cuts the griffin loose and takes off. Uzuma fires spells at him to make him stop, but Sarah notices that he's headed toward the village. Right then, a giant wyvern appears above the griffin and tries to snatch the egg, but it dodges and unintentionally lures the wyvern swarm towards the village. Immediately, Sarah takes charge to stop the griffin, but when Rhys finishes stealing all the eggs, he pops a red pill and flatlines his subordinate. Seeing this, Sarah tells Alma to take on the black wyvern, so Alma asks to borrow her bond spirit to aid in battle. Meanwhile, Latifah is in the forest below, still depressed over being separated from Rio. Just then, Reese's underling drops close to her, and she notices him alongside a broken wyvern egg. As he inspects it, the black wyvern finds her and loses his mind upon seeing the broken egg. Back in the village, Rio sees everyone running around, so Dominic tells him they're under attack by a flight of wyverns. Immediately, he rushes to the forest to find Latifah, not knowing that the wyvern is cooking her. Luckily, Alma appears at the last second and saves her life, before summoning her own ice spirit and combining with Sarah's fire spirit to do damage to the wyvern. She then smacks the monster with her hammer, but it pushes him back and she crashes into a tree before falling down. As she recovers, Latifah realizes that the village will be cooked, so she decides to become bait for the monster. Alma initially stops her, but when Latifah says she is part of the village as well, Alma agrees to work with her. However, the regret is real quick when Latifah finds herself cornered and about to get squished by the wyvern. Luckily, Rio arrives and quickly moves her out of the way. Latifah apologizes for running away from him, but he gently tells her it's fine and tells her to stay back. He then flies up and beats the wyvern with his bare hands, causing the monster to aim a huge fireball at it. Rio cleverly uses wind magic to blow out the fire before sending a ball of energy in its mouth and smacking his jaw to make him swallow it. After the ball explodes, the wyvern comes crashing down, and Rio notices that all the smaller wyverns have run off after their leader's defeat. Just then, the other girls appear and are shocked to learn that Rio defeated the wyvern with his bare hands. But Rio is more concerned about the wounded. Luckily, no one sustained any injuries, but this makes them curious as to why the other wyverns retreated. The following day, Rio and Latifah continue their conversation, and she admits that she knew he was going to leave one day. She thinks it's because she causes him problems, but he says she's his little sister and that she doesn't cause him any problems at all. At this, she embraces him, tears streaming down her face, and says she wants to be his sister forever, hoping to see him soon. Rio tells her he's going to Yagumo to learn more about his parents, so in response, she decides to share her secret too. Finally, she tells Rio that she was reincarnated into this world and she used to live in Japan before this. Rio tells her he also came from Japan and hadn't told her before because she wasn't very stable back then. He admits that he has regrets in his previous life, but now that he has a second chance, he wants to make sure he covers all bases. Hearing this, Latifah promises to train hard and wait for his return. Later, it's time for Rio to leave, and he thanks the elders for everything. In response, Dominic gives him a sword of mithril and armor made from the wyvern he defeated. Ursula gives him a bag full of medicines, along with several bags of food and drinks from the villagers. Rio says it's a bit hard for him to carry all this, so Sildora gives him a space-time cache that can store an infinite number of items. Humbly accepting the gifts, Rio promises to defend the village in case of emergency, and as he says his goodbyes, Latifah runs into his arms. Afterward, she waves him goodbye with a smile, but as soon as he leaves, she starts to cry. 2 weeks later, Rio arrives in the Yagumo region and notices that everyone's hair is black like his and his mother's. He then approaches 2 girls, Sayo and Ruri, and asks them to take him to the village head. Ruri says the head is her grandma and immediately takes him to her house, but Sayo looks at him holding an eggplant, wishing she were holding his eggplant instead. Once there, Ruri sees an angry old hag who introduces herself as Yuba and asks why he's dressed all funny. Rio says he's from a different country and has come to learn about someone who used to live here a while ago. Hearing this, Yuba invites him inside, and he tells her that his parents belonged to this region 15 years ago. Yuba asks for their names, and he tells her it was Zen and Aime, which piques Yuba's interest. She then tells Sayo and Ruri to leave the room, but Sayo starts pouting as the plot was just getting thicker. After they leave, Rio continues his story, saying that Zen died before he was born, and he lived happily with Ayami until she died too. She once promised to take him to Yagumo, so he's come here to learn more about his parents and build their graves in the town they lived in. Yuba then reveals that she knew both of his parents, and he looks a lot like them. When he asks how, Yuba reveals that his father was her son, which makes this old hag his grandmother. Additionally, she tells him that they already have graves for his parents and takes him to the graveyard so he can pay his respects. There, Yuba tells him that Zen and Ayame left this country in secret for a certain reason and weren't going to return. For that reason, their close people made graves for them. Rio asks why his parents had to leave, but she says it's not the right time for him, and she will tell him later. She also asks him to live in this village for a while, since he's her grandson, and it would be nice to have another family member, since everyone she knows is dead, and all she has is Ruri. She then suggests they head back, but when Rio asks if she's sure about him living here, Yuba tells him that he's welcome anytime, as long as he doesn't try to give backshots to Ruri. As she walks off, Rio stays at the graves for a bit before heading back, and both Yuba and Ruri welcome him. After spending the night there, Rio wakes up to find Yuba working in the living room, and says he also wants to help around. Just then, Ruri wakes up and casually walks into the living room with her melons poking out, but once Yuba reminds her that they have a man in the house, she quickly covers up and runs off frantically. Later, Rio demonstrates his cooking skills, so Yuba asks him to make miso soup, adding that Sayo and his brother Shin are also coming today. Ruri then asks him to use the water from that pot, as they fill it with spirit arts every day, which Rio finds interesting. To flex on them, Rio creates hot water using spirit arts, and when Ruri is surprised, he promises to teach her how to do it later. Soon after, Sayo and Shin arrive, and Shin is initially not very fond of Rio, but after tasting his finger-licking miso soup, everyone falls in love with his cooking. After they're done eating, Yuba asks Shin to take Rio to Dola's place. Shin thinks Rio doesn't have it in him to become a hunter, because he's built like a femboy, but Yuba says he'll be fine since he traveled along to many countries. Hearing this, Shin excitedly tells Rio that they're going hunting, and the last one to the field has a small PP. Sayo apologizes for Shin's behavior, but Rio tells her he's got 8 inches before heading out, which makes her blush. When Ruri asks her why she was calling him sir, she gets all shy and says Rio acts like a noble. Meanwhile, Rio outperforms everyone in hunting and impresses Dola, which makes Shin jealous. By the end, Shin is unable to hunt even a single prey, causing him to swarm off in frustration. Dola asks Rio not to worry about Shin, and as Rio heads home, he notices that he got pretty dirty while hunting. He then uses spirit arts to create a whole bathhouse and takes a warm bath. As he exits it, he finds Sayo and Ruri outside, and they are impressed by his creation. Ruri then notes that he smells nice and asks Ruri to sniff his armpits, but Ruri gets flustered and refuses to do it. At this, Sayo pushes her closer to him, and as Ruri smells him, Rio reveals that this smell comes from soap. Just then, Shin arrives with his friends, and when he learns that Rio created a bathhouse for everyone, Shin starts cussing him for stealing all of his aura. At this, Sayo tells him to behave, but when he calls Rio a weakling, Sayo grabs Rio's arm and says he's 10 times the man Shin will ever be. Over the next few weeks, Rio helps on the fields, and after the harvest, Yuba asks him to guard their transport to the capital. Just then, they hear a commotion at the bathhouse, and it's Shin arguing with a diddler named Gon, who is trying to swipe Ruri and Sayo's V card. Shin wants to smack Gon in the face, but Ruri asks him to show restraint, because Gon is the son of the neighboring village chief. At this, Gon tells Ruri that he's their guest, and she should let him sleep in her room. But Shin has had enough at this point and throws hands at him. At this, Gon grabs him by the throat, but Yuba arrives and tells him to let the boy go. She then tells Gon that he was out of line, and she will only let him stay if he does not leave the guest house the entire night. Hearing this, Gon decides to leave but runs into Rio on the way. He tries to kick Rio in the leg, but Bro loses all aura when he trips and falls flat on his face. That night, Sayo stays over at Yuba's place, and Rio gives them a protective amulet which will alert him of any sus activity in their room. Meanwhile, Gon and her guys are in the guest room, and they are definitely up to something. The next day, Tax Examiner Saga visits the village to check on the quality of the harvest, and after spending the whole day with him, Rio practices his sword swings in the evening. He then notices Ruri and Sayo watching him, and they come out to ask why he started learning martial arts. Taking a story from Haruto's memories, Rio says he did it to protect a girl he liked, but he is no longer in contact with her. Ruri tells him not to worry as he'll find love again, hinting at Ruri, which makes her blush. That night, while the girls are sleeping, Gon finally makes his move and tries to diddle Ruri. However, Sayo shows up, and when he sees Gon on top of her, it reminds her of the man who took his mother's life. Filled with rage, Rio throws him outside and rearranges his facial features with his fist until Saga wakes up and stops him. Afterward, Rio heads out to get some air, admitting that this is the second time he's wanted to take a life, also adding that he's becoming more and more like Haruto every day. The next day, after Saga reveals that Gon has been arrested, Rio apologizes for his behavior, but they all tell him he did nothing wrong, which makes him feel much better. Days later, the villagers are loading the harvest for transport, while Gon and his men are locked in a cage for following Diddy's footsteps. Yuba thanks Saga for taking Gon to prison and also protecting their transport, but he says he's just doing his job. Yuba then hands him a letter and asks him to give it to Lord Goki, and Saga agrees to do it. After that, the transport team leaves for the royal capital, and Rio, Sayo, and Shin go with them. At the crossroads, they part ways with Saga's team and reach the royal capital several days later. After checking into a hotel, Dola tells everyone not to wander off far as he has to go out for a job. He then asks Rio and Shin to come with him, and after handing over Gon and his men to the prison guards, they head to a local restaurant to cool off. There, they order kamutin, and Rio is surprised because he's never eaten it before. At this, Shin and Dolan get excited for him to try it, and once he says he likes the taste, they become thrilled. Afterward, Shin thanks Rio for helping Sayo, but Rio asks him not to mention it. Shin also says Sayo likes kamutan and will get upset with him if he doesn't bring her here. The following day, Rio accompanies Sayo for grocery shopping, and on the way, Rio asks if she'd like to have some kamuden after this. Turns out, Shin asked him to take her to the restaurant, because she wanted to try it so she could make it herself, but since he didn't, they got into a fight. Rio also says that he's a good brother and cares for her, and Sayo agrees. Just then, they pass an accessory stall, and the lady there asks Rio to get something for his girlfriend. Sayo immediately says she's not his girlfriend, but the lady asks her to buy something anyway. Rio also asks her to buy something for herself, so Sayo looks through the goods and gets a pink flower hairpin. When Rio says it looks good on her, Sayo freezes for a moment and starts to blush. When the lady tells her the price, she decides not to because it's too expensive, but Rio pays for her instead. After he walks away, the lady asks Sayo to bend for him already, which makes her blush. Just then, they spot someone trying to kidnap a girl named Komomo, but Rio quickly steps up and knocks the man down. As everyone applauds him, Komomo's guard quickly arrives, so Rio hands the girl over, grabs Sayo's hand, and vanishes from there. Turns out, Komomo is Saga's daughter, and he learns from his father, Lord Gauki, about the attempted kidnapping, as well as her savior, who disappeared after the scene. After that, Saga hands over the letter that Yuba gave him, and Gouki gets shocked when he reads it. He then asks Saga if he met someone named Rio, and Saga is confused as to why his father is acting so surprised. Meanwhile, Rio and Sayo return after eating kamotan, and she promises Shin to make it for him when they return to the village. Just then, everyone notices that she's wearing a hairpin, and when they ask how she got it, Rio decides to scuttle the scene. Just then, Saga arrives with his parents, Lord Gouki and Lady Kyoko, and they hold a private meeting with Rio. They reveal they were both attendants of his mother, Ayame, and she was the princess of Karasuki Kingdom. While Rio is stunned, Gouki adds that his father, Zen, was a soldier who excelled in both swordsmanship and spirit arts. Because of that, he was hired to guard Lady Ayame, but she grew a liking to him. However, when a prince of the neighboring kingdom of Rokurin came to sign a peace treaty, he grew a liking to Ayama and tried to abduct her. Luckily, Zen was there to protect her, but the ambassador got salty and demanded Zen's execution as well as a political marriage to Ayame. That was the reason why Ayame and Zen ran away, and after all these years, Gaki and Kyoko are heartbroken to learn that both of them have passed away. He also tells Rio that his grandparents, the king and the queen, want to see him, and Rio agrees to meet him. The next day, they take him to the castle, where he meets King Homura and Queen Shizuku. As he takes a seat, he notices that Shizuku looks a lot like his mother, which makes her happy. She then asks him about Ayame and Zen, so Rin bluntly tells her that both of his parents have died. Homura wants to know how they lived and died, so Rio says his dad died very early on, while his mother was a kind person who always had a smile on her face. Every day with her was a blessing, but when Rio was 5, she passed away. They want to know how she died, but Rio warns her that it will be incredibly painful to hear. Even then, they insist that he tell the story, so Rio reveals that she was murdered before his very eyes. The man who took her life was named Lucius, and he used to be an adventurer who once worked with Zen. One day, while Ayame left to buy groceries, Zen showed up at the house and chugged a strange potion down his throat. When Ayame returned, she could not understand what was happening, but Zen turned to her and mercilessly stabbed her to death in front of Rio. Soon after, Rio woke up in the slums and lived there for 2 years until he rescued a princess and was allowed to attend a magic academy for nobles. Most of the students treated him harshly, but he found a friend who made it easy for him to survive there. After spending a few years there, Rio left the academy and came to Yagumo to learn more about his parents. He admits he harbors no hate for anyone, but he will not forgive Lucius and make sure he pays for what he has done. Homura understands his pain but warns him that the path of revenge often leads to misery, but Rio still wants to avenge his mother. At this, Homura asks him to spar with Gaki because he's the strongest in the whole kingdom, and beating him would mean Rio is ready. As they step outside, they run into Komomo and her guard Aoi, and that's when they learn that Rio was the one who rescued Komomo. Later, the duel begins, and Rio charges at Gouki with super speed, but he blocks it and praises his skills. After they exchange some blows, Gouki realizes that Rio is the main character, so he pulls out his ultimate move, Air Slash, against Rio. However, Rio uses spirit arts to disperse it and ends the duel in style. Everyone is shocked at Gouki's defeat, and Rio assures his grandparents that he's ready. Soon after, he returns to the village and pays respects to his late parents, telling them that he's ready to get his hands dirty. Later that night, he tells Sayo that he's her cousin and also the prince of this kingdom, but Rory thinks he's just playing with her. However, after Yuba assures her that he's telling the truth, Rory starts to panic and addresses him as Lord Rio. At this, Rio tells her to chill because he doesn't consider himself royalty and asks her to treat him like she's always treated him. In response, Rory asks him to call her by her name too, and Rio agrees to do it. Afterward, he tells both of them he'll leave this village by the end of the year, as he has something to do. Rory eagerly asks if he'll come back someday, and he says he will if they allow him. Rory gets annoyed that he's still being so formal and sternly tells him that he can come any time he wants. She then asks if someone is waiting for him, and he tells them he's going to meet someone who sees him as an older brother. The next day, he meets the rest of the girls, and they immediately notice how he's being so formal with Rory. She says it's because they've been living in the same house, so she asked Rio to be more casual with her. He asks if it sounds strange, but Seo tells him it's fine, wishing that he'd also be casual with her. Then, over the next few months, Rio continues to help the villagers with pretty much everything and becomes an important member of the village. One day, while he's helping with planting rice, he notices that Seo is a bit behind and decides to help her. He then tells her that he'd like for her to supervise the crops once he's gone, but this shocks her because this is the first time he's heard about his leaving. When she asks, he confirms that he's going to leave after the harvest, and she asks if he'll visit them often. Rio says he's not sure because he's going far, and this breaks her poor heart. Her eyes tear up, but she quickly wipes them and pretends that she's got something in her eye. Later, she returns home and breaks down crying right as Shin walks into the room. Seeing her in this state, he suspects that Rio did something to hurt her, but she assures him that he did nothing of sorts. She then tells him that Rio is going to leave the village soon, so Shin runs off to see him. Once at Yuba's place, he begs Rio to stay in the village, but Sayo arrives and apologizes for Shin's behavior before dragging him away. As days go by, Sai pretends to be okay but trains in secret so she can carry her own weight. Then, on the day of the festival, she approaches Rio and asks if she can have a moment with her. Rio then follows her into the woods, where she finally admits that she is in love with him, which comes as a shock to him. He apologizes to her, saying that he cannot return her feelings, partly because he's leaving. At this, she asks him to take her along, admitting that she's been training for months, so she won't slow him down. Rio politely tells him that it's not possible, and she begins to cry, desperately holding his hand and begging him to just let her stay by his side. Once again, Rio tells her he cannot and walks away, leaving the poor girl heartbroken. On his way out, he notices Shin and apologizes to him too. Shin then goes to comfort Seo, unaware that Lord Gaoki is watching it all. That night, Rio says farewell to Yuba and Ruri, and when he reaches the village's border, he finds Seo waiting for him. She bids him farewell with a gentle smile, telling him that she'll work really hard, so he must give his all too. Rio promises that he will, and also says he's happy that she came, and she says she wouldn't have missed this for the world. Afterward, Rio heads back to the beast folks' territory, and Latifah, now all grown up, happily runs into his arms. Afterward, he has dinner with the elders, telling them everything he's learned about his parents, including his ties with royalty. Sildora asks if he'll stay this time as well, and Rio says yes, but only for a few months. Latifah is sad that he'll leave again, but he promises that he'll return sooner this time. Ursula then asks him if he needs anything, and Rio says that he actually wants a portable house that he can store in his space-time cache. Dominic agrees to build him one, but in the meantime, Latifah is made in charge of catering to Rio's needs. At night, he returns home to the girls, and seeing them talking and all makes him feel nostalgic. He notes that all of them have grown into beautiful women, except for Alma, who's still a shoddy. Latifah then asks him to join her in the bath, but Sarah quickly reminds her that it's not that kind of anime. One fine morning, Rio is screaming in his bedroom, and as Sarah rushes to check up on him, she finds him in bed with a gorgeous pink-haired baddie. The other girls quickly arrive and are all shocked to see him in this state, but Rio panics as he has no idea where she came from. The girls frantically ask who this girl is, and he says he doesn't know her. Hearing this, the girl wakes up and reveals she's a spirit who formed a covenant with him. Rio recalls Dryas telling him about the spirit, so when he asks how they formed a contract, she says she does not remember. Rio then realizes that she's the same spirit who appeared before him when he was young and taught him how to use magic. He keeps bombarding her with questions, but she does not have any memories of the past. She does not have a name either, and asks Rio to give her one, but the girls notice that she's calling him Haruto instead of Rio. Rio promises to explain everything later, only to notice that the spirit can talk to him through telepathy as well. After asking her not to reveal his secret, he uses words to say that he needs some time to think of a name for her. Sarah then suggests they take her to the elders and Lady Dryas, who might be able to help him, since she's also a person-shaped spirit. The spirit agrees to go, dropping her towel in front of Rio and using magic to put new clothes on her. Now in a white dress, she gives off a warm and radiant vibe, so Rio decides to name her Aishia. After he takes Aishia to the elders, Lady Dryas appears as well, and she finds it weird that Aishia lost her memories. When asked, she says she only knows that she's bonded with Haruto, which surprises everyone as they've never heard this name before. Rio then explains that he's a wanted man in the Straw region, so he uses Haruto as an alias to go unnoticed. Putting that to the side, Dryas asks Aishia what element she is good at, and she says she's practically the Avatar, much to everyone's shock. They step outside, where Dryas puts Aishia in a duel with Rio to test her abilities. As the battle starts, Aishia moves at flashing speeds, but Rio matches her energy while also noticing that she has copied his techniques. After exchanging fists and kicks, Rio tries to attack with elements, but Aishia is just as strong as him, if not more. When things get a little too intense, Dryas quickly asks them to stop the match, or they'll turn the whole place upside down. Dryas believes Aishia is much stronger than this, but she still hasn't fully evolved, so she decides to share her knowledge with Aishia. This also means that Dryas has accepted Aishia in the village, so Sildora decides to throw a feast to welcome her. As the days go by, Aishia gets familiar with everyone, and soon enough, Dominic finishes constructing Rio's portable house with a bath. With the house now complete, Rio decides that it's time for him to leave again, and this makes Latifah sad. However, she puts on a smile and promises to cook him a nice meal. After she leaves, Sarah asks Rio to have a word with Latifah because she really misses him. That night, while Rio is chilling in the bath, Latifah shows up and asks if she can wash his back. Rio gets nervous and tells her no, but when she threatens to fiddle with his joystick, he agrees to it. While she's at it, she tells him her name was Suzune in Japan, and Rio also reveals that, in reality, Haruto was his name in his previous life. Latifah says she had figured it out, adding that she used to take the same bus as him to school. This makes him realize she was also caught in the bus accident, but she's content with it because she now has a good big brother. Rio feels that he's a bad brother because he is never around, but she embraces him and says she will miss him a lot. The next day, Ursula gives Rio a teleportation crystal, which will let him come to this village anytime he wants, but Dominic adds that it only works in one direction. Sildora then gives him a pin that'll let him change the color of his hair, adding that it'll help him blend in when he's in Strahl. After that, Rio says goodbye to Latifah and the others and takes off alongside Aisha. On the way, he tells Aisha about Celia, but she already knows everything. Rio says he hasn't written to her after the first letter, so he wants to see her before he gets back on track. Soon after, Rio and Aisha arrive in Strahl, and noticing that it's more crowded than usual, Rio uses the pin to become blonde. He then heads to a bakery, where he learns that there's a noble's wedding parade tomorrow, which is why the place is crowded. Afterward, he tells Aisha that he's going to the academy, and she decides to come with him. At night, Rio uses magic to sneak into the basement, and as he stands in front of Celia's office, he recalls the last time he saw her. However, when he opens the door, he is shocked to see that her office has been emptied. Confused, he heads to the next room, where Aisha uses a spell to hypnotize the professor. Rio then asks him about Celia, and the man tells him she is at the royal palace. Rio asks what she's doing there, only to learn that she's about to get married to Charles, the very man who tortured Rio. The man further reveals that the kingdom of Beltram suffered a crushing defeat by the Proxia Empire, and they barely negotiated for peace thanks to Duke Arbor. However, the royal family was stripped of their rule, and when Duke Huguenot's faction was made to take responsibility, they ran away like a little wuss. This allowed Duke Arbor to seize the throne, and he has decided to form a political alliance with the House of Clare by marrying his son Charles to Celia, who is the daughter of said house. Rio asks if House Clare is okay with this marriage, but the man says he does not know, so Aisha puts him to sleep, and they walk out of the room. Outside, Rio says he wants to see Celia before the wedding ceremony takes place, so Aisha decides to sneak in and find a way for him to reach Celia's room. At that time, Celia was having dinner with her father, Roland, and his disgusting fiancé Charles. Roland shows concern for his daughter, but Celia puts on her poker face and tells him not to worry about her. Charles backs her, saying that they should be worrying about Roland instead because he's heard rumors that he's in cahoots with Duke Huguenot. Roland swears that he will never betray this kingdom, but Charles mysteriously says that things are not looking good for Roland, but he can save face by serving House Arbor. Finally, Roland admits to himself that he's been outplayed and has even served Celia on a silver platter, but there's nothing he can do now. After dinner, Celia returns to her room, and after lamenting over her fate, she opens her drawer to retrieve a letter that Rio once wrote her. As she holds it against her chest, she admits that she wishes to see him, and the feelings she has for him have not faded. However, just when she's about to burn the letter, Rio walks into her room and puts his hair back to normal so she can recognize him. Without hesitation, she runs into his arms and, with teary eyes, she tells him that she missed him a lot. She notes that he's grown quite tall, and Rio responds that she's grown to be a beautiful woman as well. At this, she gets flustered and starts gushing over how handsome he has become, but after taking a moment to look at him, she asks him to tell him everything about his journey. She even asks him to have tea with her as they used to, and while she's pouring, he asks if she's really getting married. When she confirms this, Rio asks if she really wants to marry Charles, and she admits that she consented to it. She also knows that Charles has tortured Rio in the past, but she acts like it was her own decision, not influenced by his family at all. She further says that Charles is now a decent man who is kind towards women, but when Rio doubts it, she gets frustrated and asks if he's going to marry her instead. Rio gets overwhelmed by this, but she quickly says that she was just joking and tells him to leave because her attendance will come soon, and she has a big day tomorrow. She also asks him not to attend her wedding as it would be embarrassing, but when Rio stands there shocked, she urges him to leave the room, or she will start screaming. After she pushes him out of the room, Rio finally leaves, allowing Celia to cry and be happy at the same time, because she met his true love before she's married off to a bum. Outside, he tells Aisha that he didn't get much from Celia and wants to learn more, and she agrees to help him. The following day, Reese comes over to congratulate Reese, adding that they are now allies now that their countries have signed a peace treaty. While Charles is bragging about getting sloppy toppies from his new bride, Rice senses a strong spirit nearby and excuses himself outside. Meanwhile, Celia is all dressed up for marriage, and Charles comes to her tent to get a look at her. After admiring her beauty, Charles introduces Celia to her other wives, which leaves her in shock. After he leaves, the first wife, Tenesina, immediately makes it clear that once Celia is married to Charles, she will be the last in line and do as told. While Tenesina is asserting her authority over Celia, Princess Christina shows up to see her. Tenesina invites her inside, but Christina tells her to scram because she wants to speak with Celia in private. After the hoes leave, Christina and Celia get real, talking about how much their lives have changed over the last few months. Christina believes that her family's incompetence led to the kingdom's downfall, and she apologizes for the sacrifice Celia is making to cover their ineptness. Celia assures her that she consented to this marriage, but Christina can see that her smile has disappeared. She recalls how happy Celia was when she was a professor in the academy, but now she's a bird in a cage. Christina promises that she will find a way to free her, and Celia prays that Christina prays for her and Flora to be reunited again. Meanwhile, Charles meets Alfred, who is now the commander of the armed forces, but he quickly learns that Charles is a moron when he brags about his authority over everyone. Soon after, the wedding ceremony begins, and as Celia rides to the altar with Charles, the people start calling her the Silver Bride. Rio is in the crowd as well, and thanks to intel from Aisha, he now knows that Celia only agreed to marry to save the kingdom. When Celia closes in, Aisha uses telepathy to communicate with her and pinpoints Rio's location in the crowd. As soon as Celia sees him, she tears up and starts to shake, which worries Charles. To cover it up, she tells the bum that she's too happy to get married to him, only to look back and see that Rio has disappeared. Once the carriage stops, Celia tells herself that she's a doll with no feelings, and is about to take Charles's hand. Just then, Rio runs in and starts fighting the guards. When the mages fire at him, he dodges their spells and takes a giant leap, jumping over all of them and coming into contact with the elite guards. Charles tells Celia not to worry, as these elite guards will roast this intruder, but Rio kicks their butts so hard that Charles starts to feel pain in his own. After that, Rio steps on the carriage and knocks Charles out with a punch right before holding a knife to Celia's throat. Duke, Roland, and Arbor are both pissed, but the guards stop them from making a wrong move. Rio then uses telepathy and asks Celia to just play along, promising to explain everything later. He then asks her one last time what she wishes for, and Celia is shocked that he risked his life just to hear her thoughts. Rio responds that he owes her his life and can't let her ruin her life like this, but Celia doesn't want to put her own feelings first as it will cause trouble to others. Rio says it's pretty obvious from the look on her face that she's not happy, so he begs her not to give up and just say the word, and he'll make sure she gets out of here safely. With tears in her eyes, she tells Rio to take her away, so Rio declares to everyone that he's kidnapping Celia before taking her in his arms and running off. As the mages fire at him, he uses spirit arts to deflect the attacks, and Reese realizes this boy is the same one who caught his attention several years ago. To test his skills, Reese sends a strong spell at him, but Rio deflects that too and runs off with Celia. As Charles sees his chances of sloppy toppy dropping, Alfred deploys aerial knights to catch Rio. After that, he leaves the command in Vanessa's hand and personally goes after Rio, all while Reese enjoys the situation in spectator mode. With Rio hopping rooftops, the aerial knights chase after him and make it difficult for him to create distance. Thus, he jumps into the streets and summons Aisha, so she can take Celia while he serves as a decoy. After he returns to the roof, the troops realize that he's dropped Celia off, so they ask for group reinforcements to look for her. They also begin firing at him, but Rio expertly dodges the attacks before landing again and causing a big distraction by fighting the ground troops. Soon after, Alfred himself shows up and challenges him to a duel, and Rio instantly recognizes him as the strongest in the kingdom. As they come face to face, Rio has to be on the back foot because Alfred is too strong, and Alfred also notices that Rio is purposely holding back. Thinking that Rio is underestimating him, Alfred charges up his sword and slams it into the ground, causing an explosion so strong that it destroys the road. However, Alfred knows his attack didn't hit Rio, so believing that he fled, Alfred asks his men to look for him. Soon after, the weather becomes cloudy, while Celia and Aisha get away from the kingdom. Celia worries about Rio's safety, but Aisha assures her that Rio has plot armor. Seconds later, Rio arrives, and Celia happily throws herself into his arms. Rio assures her that everything is okay now and even thanks Aisha for helping him. Since she's now free, Celia says it all feels like a dream because she had already given up on life, but thanks to him, she has another shot at it. She then asks him to take him to a safe place so they can catch up, but just then, several beams of light strike the ground, and Aisha senses that someone needs their help. That's it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and comment if you want part 2 of this series. If you want to see other recaps, watch this video on screen.